Hello my friends! If you're new here, my name is Rachel and welcome to the channel, and if you are returning, hi, welcome back. It is so nice to see you again. Happy Halloween, my girlies and my ghoulies. I am so excited to be celebrating this spooky day here with you guys on the channel. I am loving the speed build that we are going to be working on today. Today's speed build is going to feature the old black train in the Eternal Garden Cemetery, both from the 𝒷𝓊𝓃𝓃𝓎 mini series Over the Garden Wall that we're using as heavy inspiration for our small town inspired autumn themed island, 𝒷𝓊𝓃𝓃𝓎. If this is your first time tuning into the channel, I do recommend that you go and watch the other speed builds that I have up on my channel for the island, just to give you a bit of context for what we have going on here. But at the same time, it's Halloween, we're just here for the vibes, so if you just want to stick around for the vibes, that's cool with me. You're gonna get them in this video. It's not inherently spooky or all in your face Halloween, there's not pumpkins all over the place, but I feel like the core essence of these two speed builds that we're going to be working on just kind of encapsulate Halloween. Like if it was Halloween night and you were walking through these spots, you would probably be a little freaked out. But I am so excited, so all rambling aside, we are just going to go straight into the speed build. Alright, so we are actually starting on the railroad first, and the area that we are working in is the cliff above the Pottsfield Pumpkin Patch. So if you've not watched the Over the Garden Wall themed video that we did a couple of episodes ago, I do highly recommend going and watching that first, just because it helps give some context for this area. This build and the cemetery are both very heavily Over the Garden Wall themed, so we are going to get into some spoiler territory. I do apologize. I just want to talk about the TV show and the symbolism of the black train and what it means in the show, and why I thought it would be perfect to do a build like this on Halloween. This build is not inherently spooky, but I feel like the symbolism behind black trains, especially in literature and TV shows, is pretty spooky. So if you've never seen Over the Garden Wall, this is what we're going to get into our spoiler territory, but in the final episode of the series, we get a bit of an explanation as to why Wirt and Greg ended up in the unknown, or what the unknown could possibly be. Now, I think the show takes place in the late 80s or the early 90s, and the boys end up running from law enforcement on Halloween night after getting up to some brotherly shenanigans, and they end up having an accident that leaves them unconscious. Now, in the show, they are in a cemetery meeting up with some friends, and when the police show up to give them a bit of a hard time for being hooligans, they end up running through the cemetery and climbing a wall, and when they do, they fall over onto a train track, and when they come to, they realize that a large black train, aka the train that we're building right here, is coming straight for them. So instead of getting hit by the train, they decide to hop off the train tracks, but when they do, they tumble into a creek where they lose consciousness. And in the way that I interpret the show, I believe that the unknown is what takes place as they are struggling for consciousness and to reach the surface of this creek, and they are stuck in purgatory trying to find their way back home. And in doing so, they end up, of course, breaking free, and when they do, that's when they awaken, and it does have a happy ending, I promise. It's not as spooky as I might make it seem, but of course the black train does have a lot of symbolism, both in the show but also in literature in general. A little bit of context and backstory for me: I am a writer. I have been my entire life. I love creating stories. I love writing them. It brings me such joy, and I hope to one day be an author, specifically a fantasy author. But I have always loved symbolism. I have always loved reading between the lines and connecting with an author on a bit of a deeper level through symbolism. I've loved the way that humans have an innate desire for symbols and for creating them and seeking them out, and maybe I'm just looking too deep into it, maybe I'm just thinking way too hard and pretentiously about all of this, but at the same time I just think that it's so beautiful, and I wanted to showcase all of that on this island. I feel like Over the Garden Wall as a TV show is just such a beautiful masterpiece in detail and design and narrative, and how even in the first episode, before even knowing about a train, the second that the opening sequence begins, you hear the blaring horn of an old train, and it's so amazing to rewatch that show and find so many new nuanced details that you might have missed in your first time around. And I really wanted to highlight that in this build, which is why of course I had to dedicate an entire area to the railroad, and of course it's also a little spooky. You gotta add the fact that it's a little spooky. The cemetery definitely has a bit more of a spooky vibe than the railroad, but once again I just feel like it's more so the symbolism of death and purgatory and the journey to death through trains that is more on the spooky side. But yeah, so to talk about the actual build itself, of course I wanted this train to be black, but there wasn't really an option for me to do that with the items that we had in game. I really wanted to use the plaza train item, so I decided to find a custom design code that actually matched with a standout cutty situation. And so I decided to go that option, and I actually really like the pops of purple. I think that it's going to help me bring more pops of purple into different areas of the island, because I know that when I work on the carnival I am going to be using this black, red, gold, and purple variation, so I want to be able to have some purple flowers and things to have it tie into the surrounding area. So having another spot with purple I feel like is going to help me bring that color scheme along into another spot. And I also feel like it makes it look a little less menacing. When you're actually in the pumpkin patch and you look up and you see the train, it doesn't blend into the surrounding. You can actually see that it's a train because the purple makes it stand out. So I am really glad in the end that I went with this specific design. There are so many beautiful train design codes on Pinterest that people have put together, so if you are looking for any train builds, Pinterest is definitely the place to go. That's actually where I get all of my design codes, is Pinterest. Sometimes on Instagram, but mostly on Pinterest. But I actually went through, and you see that I used a lot of tree standees. So on the island itself I have a lot of rocky jut outs in the back of the island, and originally I had chosen the layout because I was like, ooh, I can do something cool with those. I didn't know what I was going to do with them, and here we are. I decided to put a bunch of tree standees as well as design codes and a cave actually to make it look like the forest continues onward. Of course, we have the water in the background, so maybe that is the creek from the show, who knows. I was just trying to figure out the best way that I could fill in this spot, and I knew that having it end in this almost faux extended forest would definitely be the way to go. I feel like adding the tree standees are something that gives it a lot more depth. That's actually an item that I did not like using. I had never once in my life wanted to use the mountain standees or the tree standees or any of that type of stuff, but when I worked on this build I actually really loved using them. It's something that I wish I would have given a chance on some older islands, and I will try to use again in some different spots as well as some future islands, because it's such a good item. I wish of course that we could just put trees wherever we wanted, but at the same time I know that's not really a possibility, so I will use the tree standee as much as I can. So I'm just going through now and trying to clutter up this front area without covering the sightlines too much. I wasn't too worried about covering the sightlines back here because of course you can see the barn, and I didn't want the barn to immediately have the train be the backdrop if you looked all the way up, so I decided to use some fully grown trees. But in the areas that actually are in front of the train, I'm using the large young hardwoods to try and cover up some of the seams. That is such a big pet peeve of mine. I absolutely hate it when you can see the line between items. Seeing the line between the stalls and the standees was bothering me so bad, but at the same time it's okay. It doesn't look too bad, especially when you look at it from the right angle. This is not really supposed to be an area that you're necessarily supposed to walk through. You totally can. I made it to where the sidewalks are not covered, so if you want to use this to get from one side of the island to the other, you are more than welcome to if you're touring, but at the same time it was not intended to be an area for people to necessarily explore. So that's why I decided to just clutter it up as much as possible, and I wasn't too concerned about the stalls because I knew that if you were looking at the train it was most likely going to be from down below, so that those weird seams would be covered up. Now of course I'm just going through and cluttering the area with the usual foresty items that I love to use. I think the black cosmos are officially my favorite flower in game. They're so pretty. I love the little pop of orange that they have in the middle. I love how the black is more of a red hued. It's so pretty. I love them so much, and I am pairing them with black tulips as well as the purple mums. Now the purple mums are the perfect shade of purple to match alongside the train. I also just love the texture of the mums. I think even though the black cosmos are my favorite flower in game, mums are my favorite type of flower. If I had to only use one on an island, it would probably be the mums because they're just so pretty. And you saw just then I went through and added a great vine or a giant vine. I've never used that item before, but I loved it in that back corner. I thought it was so pretty. I might actually go through and update this area to have a couple more giant vines because I fell in love with that item. I put it down. It was my first time ever placing it and I was like, I need more. This is gorgeous. It makes me want to do like a fairy tale type of island or something like that. Maybe that's something we can do in the future, maybe for springtime. But yeah, I'm of course going through adding a lot of weeds and design codes and flowers and just trying to make this seem like an overgrown forest area. And after a couple of finishing touches, we are going to move on to the cemetery. So now that we have finished working on the old black train, we can take this dirt path over and up to the Eternal Garden Cemetery, which is the cemetery that is in the TV show. And of course, I've already gone through and placed down all of the pathing, as well as a combination of iron and stone fencing, spooky fencing, hedges, and the fence item. I also went ahead and placed an incline as well as the museum. I thought the museum could be really cool as like a little faux mausoleum type of situation, so we're gonna build that out to better match the surrounding area. And while I'm placing the trees down, I just want to talk about this build a little bit. So originally I didn't want this island to be a one-for-one recreation of the TV show, but as we've continued building, I wanted to bring in more aspects from the show, especially after watching it during my Over the Garden Wall watch party this year, where I got so many ideas and bits of inspiration for the island. So I decided to go through and try to build out the cemetery as best I could without having the specific dimensions from the show. So I just wanted to add some main features, such as a little spot where maybe some teens are hanging out telling spooky stories around a lantern, which I feel like plays into the TV show a lot because of course when we first see the cemetery, it's because that is where Sarah, aka Wirt's crush, is hanging out with Jason Funderburker and a handful of other kids from their school telling spooky stories around a flashlight in the graveyard. So I wanted to try and have that same vibe going on here. I also feel like it plays into that kind of like 90s grunge teen vibe that we tried to include over on the beach in the video that I posted most recently of the apple orchard / fisherman's wharf, where we also included a little bonfire situation on the beach. I just want to add little spots where the villagers can hang out and almost like play out these little scenes on the island. And going through and trying to make this cemetery as closely as I could to the TV show also just made this area come together so much easier, because of course we have the railroad underneath, and so I knew that I wanted the cemetery to be right next to the railroad because of course in the TV show, as we mentioned, Wirt and Greg end up climbing a garden wall and jumping over it, and when they do, they end up on the railroad. So having this little like castle wall situation with the medieval side walls, I feel like plays into that idea where like maybe that's the wall that they jumped over, and the train that's heading toward the tunnel is actually heading toward the wall that they jumped over. So I just feel like it kind of like plays out to almost like the layout in the show. But to talk about what I've done in the build, I just went through and placed all of our trees down. I wanted to make it seem very filled in with trees and flowers. I just love that overgrown look. I feel like it helps play into how old the town is. I want the town to feel very vintage, very classic, very old, just like old Americana, the way that a lot of things in the show do. But of course, I have talked through everything I have added in this area. As you saw, I just put a song on the phonograph. It is now playing 𝒷𝓊𝓃𝓃𝓎. I was torn between 𝒷𝓊𝓃𝓃𝓎 and 𝒷𝓊𝓃𝓃𝓎, but dirge just felt more Halloween-y to me. And of course, I added some different lights like the wedding candles and the paper lantern because I wanted to add a lot of really cool ambient lighting whenever it's nighttime for some really pretty pictures. And I'm just adding this little hangout spot where maybe some teens have come out to, I don't know, tell some stories. I didn't want to go so far as to make it like a little ritual spot, but now we're just working on this entrance area where I'm creating a faux building to house some spooky pumpkins because of course it's Halloween, so I have to add some jack-o'-lanterns. I feel like that might not be very realistic because it is a graveyard, so that might be a little distasteful, but here we are doing it anyway. I added the Valiant statue, I believe, because I think it looks so pretty in a cemetery build like this. And now we're just adding some simple panels to the front of the cemetery. I might extend these simple panels out all across the sides in Sunday's speed build when we work on the forbidden forest that is going to be right here where the woodsman and his cottage is, so do stay tuned for that on Sunday. But now we're just moving on to the museum slash mausoleum. I'm going through and trying to actually hide the true facade of this building because it was just very blue and very pale, and I don't think that necessarily matched with the darker brick and black theme of the cemetery, so I'm just using the medieval buildings as well as some stone work kitchens and some simple panels to try and cover it up as much as possible. I think that it looks so cool at nighttime when you can see the light from the museum entrance, and I think that this spot just came out so cool. I've been seeing so many people use these medieval items to build out in front of the different in-game buildings, and it's just such a smart use of these items. So now I'm placing this robust statue, which was definitely giving me some pains. I could not move this one around. I ended up placing it and thinking that it's centered for some reason. It's not centered. I do apologize. I do fix it for the beauty shots because I realized that it was definitely off center, but I'm just creating a little seating area off to the side of the mausoleum. I feel like this is fairly accurate for actual cemeteries. There seems to be areas for, you know, peaceful, quiet contemplation, areas where you can just sit in the graveyard and kind of just take a moment to yourself if you need to. So I wanted to add one of those spots. And now we're moving on to the last area and the last part of this speed build, which is this main area. I wanted to add a lot of graves in this spot, so I just go through and try to clutter the area up with some flowers. I tried to do a mixture of stone tablets alongside the actual Western style headstones, and I feel like the stone tablets could maybe be a substitution for older gravestones that have probably eroded away over time, so I tried to make those seem like they've been here a bit longer than the others. I do really like the Western stones. I wish there was a version that didn't have the granite slab in the front. I feel like they would be a lot easier to use. But I am just going through and making it seem like there is a skeleton coming out of this grave, or maybe someone dug up the grave or it's about to go in, who knows. I did this on one on the other side as well, and I just think it looks so cool. I love this design code that I downloaded. But yeah, this is pretty much it for the whole build. It was definitely a really fun way to celebrate Halloween, and I'm so happy with how this whole area turned out. I can't wait to show you guys the beauty shots. It just exceeded my expectations. So after placing a couple of more items down, let's go ahead and look at the beauty shots. Alrighty my friends, that is everything for the beauty shots, and we have finally reached the end of the video, so I do hope that you guys enjoyed how this speed build turned out. I hope that I did a good job of encapsulating the feeling of Halloween into a video for the channel and for you guys, so do let me know your thoughts down below. I'm also curious because I personally am not going to be able to celebrate Halloween this year, sadly. This is actually my third year in a row that I haven't really been able to celebrate Halloween. It's not a holiday that I was necessarily able to celebrate very much growing up, and now that I'm older and my circle of friends has gotten a lot smaller, it's very hard for me to feel justified in dressing up. I also don't live in a house, so trick-or-treating is not an option if I want to have trick-or-treaters come to my door. so there will be no Halloween plans for me, sadly. So I would like to live vicariously through you guys, and video aside, which of course definitely helps get me into the spooky mood for spooky season, I want to hear what you guys are doing. What are you guys dressing up as, if you're dressing up at all? Do you have any parties planned? Do you have any movie nights planned? Are you going out with friends? Are you just gonna stay inside and give out candy to trick-or-treaters? I would love to hear what you guys have going on, if even just to make me feel like I'm doing something for Halloween. That would be so meaningful. On Halloween, as in today, right now, as of the moment that you're watching this, I am currently at work, so no Halloween for me, but that's okay because I can celebrate Halloween with you guys, which is the first time I've ever been able to do something like that, and it's so meaningful. I really hope that I did you guys proud with this video. Now, do remember, of course, to like the video and leave a comment down below telling me your favorite spot or what you've got going on tonight. And of course, subscribe, especially because on Sunday I will be posting another speed build. So if you would like to stay tuned for that, do subscribe to the channel because we will be working on a Halloween part 2 type of video. I decided to work on the neighborhood outside of the apple orchard, which is going to be very Halloween themed, as well as the Forbidden Woodsman's Forest / the old grist mill that the woodsman lives in, and over the garden wall that is going to be the area to the south of the cemetery. So do stay tuned for that. Hit the notification bell so you can get notified of when that's getting posted, and I cannot wait to see you guys on Sunday.